I'm a 33-year-old office worker, and my husband, Tony, is 5 years my senior. We've been married for 7 years, but currently, due to certain circumstances, I live with my mother. You might be wondering how I ended up in this situation. Let's rewind a few years. Tony and I decided to build a house together. However, at that time, Tony had just changed jobs, and our savings were slim. His previous job had been at a major corporation, but he faced insidious harassment from his boss, which took a toll on his mental health. After struggling with sleepless nights, he eventually found himself unable to continue working. Tony sought help from a psychiatrist and took a leave of absence for about 3 months. Despite his efforts, he couldn't bounce back, leading to his resignation. With only my salary to rely on, we managed to get by, but it was a challenging time. After 2 months of being unemployed, Tony started to regain his energy. He began taking care of himself again, and his psychiatrist was pleased with his progress. Seeing him back to this positive self was a relief. He embarked on a vigorous job search, but his resignation due to mental health issues made finding a new job difficult. Eventually, he found a position at a small company, albeit with a lower salary than before. His enthusiasm for the job was infectious, and I couldn't help but feel happy seeing him excited about his work again. It wasn't easy, but at least he was doing what he loved. We had once dreamed of starting a family, but with the uncertainty of our finances, we reluctantly put that plan on hold. Besides, I also cherished my job, and quitting wasn't an option. Just when we thought things were stabilizing, a new challenge emerged. My mother, Karen, was paralyzed in a traffic accident and had to rely on a wheelchair. With my father gone since my middle school years, she had been living alone in our old family home, which was far from wheelchair-friendly. Tony surprised us all by suggesting that we live together to support my mother. It was unexpected but characteristic of his kindness. Despite the uncertainty surrounding his new job, we decided to take the leap and apply for a mortgage. Securing the loan wasn't easy, given the short duration of Tony's current employment, but we refused to give up. With determination and resilience as our driving forces, we approached multiple mortgage companies until we finally found one willing to work with us. With the loan approved, we were ecstatic to finally buy our own home, where we could support my mother and build a new chapter of our lives together. I had always envisioned living in a home permeated with the comforting scent of wood, adorned with thick exposed beams on the ceiling, and boasting customized storage spaces tailored specifically for us. A kitchen adapted to my shorter stature and spacious flooring crafted from cypress completed the picture. Naturally, it had to be a barrier-free single-story house, ideal for easy wheelchair living. The anticipation of its completion filled us with excitement, prompting daily visits to the construction site. Finally, our meticulously designed dream home stood before us. Its ample yard provided a perfect spot for my mother, who had become hesitant to venture outdoors, to bask in the sunlight. Yet, amid our joy, there lingered a sense of dissatisfaction. The land upon which our dream home sat was a gift from Tony's beloved grandfather. Though not affluent, his grandfather held a special fondness for Tony. However, his sudden cancer diagnosis prompted him to distribute his assets, with Tony receiving the largest plot of land as per his grandfather's wishes. It felt like winning the lottery, but there was a significant caveat. The plot was merely a 5-minute stroll from Tony's family home. When we informed them of my mother's plan to move in with us, Tony's sister scoffed, deriding the idea as shameless and attributing trouble to my presence as a supposed outsider. Tony's mother echoed this sentiment, insinuating that caring for the elderly was burdensome and casting aspersions on me as if I were some sort of curse. In the face of their hurtful remarks, Tony staunchly defended my mother and me, asserting that his grandfather's gift should be cause for celebration, not contention. Despite his efforts, it became apparent that Tony's mother and sister harbored a level of malice that bordered on world class. It's truly remarkable that someone as kind-hearted as Tony could emerge from such a family dynamic. To me, he's akin to a beautiful lotus flower, flourishing amidst the murky waters. Tony often remarked about his family, citing them as prime examples of what he didn't want to emulate at home. I suspect Tony's grandfather bestowed upon us this land with the hope that we would care for his mother in her later years. Despite having other properties, he allocated Tony's sister a parking lot situated a mere 10 minutes walk from their family residence. While smaller in size compared to our portion, it already had a lucrative parking contract, offering substantial monthly income. Personally, I might have preferred this arrangement, but receiving any gift is indeed something to be grateful for. Thanks to my grandfather-in-law's generosity, we were able to construct our home without bearing the burden of land costs, significantly easing the financial strain. However, once construction was complete, we extended invitations to my mother-in-law and sister-in-law's family. During the building process, we learned that they had made unsanctioned visits to the site on multiple occasions. The disregard for our privacy was unsettling. On the day of their visit, they arrived an hour and a half later than agreed upon, offering no apology. Their sense of entitlement was palpable as they casually asserted their ownership over the house, likening it to their grandfather's property. Despite the muddy conditions outside, my sister-in-law and her husband traipsed through our pristine home without so much as a second thought, ignoring the slippers we had provided. When I suggested offering slippers for their comfort, my sister-in-law simply chuckled, dismissing the idea as unnecessary. "It's such a hassle," she remarked casually. "You can just wipe the floor." From the outset, the atmosphere was tense, and predictably, they arrived empty-handed. After touring the rooms, they eventually reached my mother's quarters, which boasted ample space and abundant sunlight. At my mother's request, we had designed it akin to a duplex, complete with its own kitchen, a room truly resembling a second living area. Upon seeing it, my mother-in-law declared, "I'm fine with this room. I want to live here." It was a presumptuous statement, to say the least. Then came the final straw. My mother-in-law remarked to my mother, "You were fortunate to have that accident, weren't you? Thanks to being paraplegic, you've moved from that old shack to such a nice house. Isn't it a turn of fortune?" My mother remained silent, her expression betraying her inner sadness. Internally seething, I was on the brink of erupting in anger, but before I could speak, Tony intervened. In a firm tone, he confronted them, questioning their humanity and expressing his disgust at their callous remarks. He demanded an apology, unwilling to tolerate their insensitivity. Instead of remorse, they responded with defensiveness. My sister-in-law accused Tony of being high and mighty, while my mother-in-law attributed Tony's supposed misfortunes to our marriage. But Tony refused to back down, vehemently defending my mother and our family. Frustrated by Tony's unwavering stance, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law eventually left, shooting me a contemptuous glance. My mother, witnessing the confrontation, offered Tony a heartfelt apology, acknowledging the pain their words had caused. In the aftermath, amidst the lingering tension, my mother extended her own apology to Tony. "I'm sorry," she said, a glimmer of remorse evident in her eyes. "I must have upset your mother and sister. I'm sorry I dampened the mood on the day of the housewarming party." Tony, however, insisted that the blame rested on him. "It's embarrassing," he said. "They really lack decency. But I'm truly sorry. I'm happy to be living with you. Please understand that." As my mother began to tear up, I reassured her. Our new home was close to Tony's parents' house, surrounded by neighbors who had known Tony since childhood. Their kindness towards us eased the transition into our new life. 4 months had passed since that incident, and we were starting to settle into our new routine. My mother's smiles were becoming more frequent. Then one day, I received a call from home while I was at work. Such calls were rare, and a sense of foreboding gripped me. My fears were realized when my mother, unable to conceal her distress, informed me that Tony had collapsed at work. Panic surged through me as I quickly made arrangements to leave for the hospital. During the journey, I tried to remain calm, conjuring up positive scenarios in my mind. But upon reaching the hospital, the sight that greeted me shattered all semblance of composure. My husband, who had left for work that morning in high spirits, was now lying unconscious, hooked up to countless tubes. I was overwhelmed, lost in a sea of disbelief and fear. The doctor's grim prognosis only intensified the sense of despair. "He's in a very dangerous condition," they said. "Even if he survives, we don't know if he will regain consciousness." I felt like I was in a movie, unable even to cry. I prayed fervently, but my prayers went unanswered. My husband Tony passed away just like that. In my state of shock, my mother and sister-in-law showed up as expected. Upon hearing of Tony's passing, my sister-in-law accused me aggressively. "Did you poison him or something? Were you after his life insurance money?" My mother-in-law joined in, cornering me with her harsh words. "Bad things always happen when you're around. Just like your mother, you really are a jinx." I was too devastated to respond. At that moment, My mother arrived in a caregiver's taxi, tears streaming down her face at the loss of Tony. Seeing her cry finally broke through my shock, and I began to sob as well. As we cried together, my mother-in-law sneered, "Oh, stop it. Can't you quit the fake crying? My son changed after meeting you. Now that he's gone, I don't want to see your faces ever again. Don't appear before us again." With that, she left the hospital. A funeral director soon arrived to help us arrange the funeral. Tony's cause of death was a subarachnoid hemorrhage. It was unimaginable. He had been perfectly fine that morning. When I informed my mother-in-law about the funeral schedule, she responded coldly, "He's always sided with you too, so I won't attend the funeral. My daughter won't come either." True to her word, neither she nor my sister-in-law and her husband attended the viewing. Despite their absence, many of Tony's colleagues and friends came to pay their respects. Their presence was a testament to the love and respect Tony had earned. The turnout at the funeral was similarly large, and I could see that Tony was deeply missed. Surrounded by people who genuinely mourned my husband, I felt a sense of solace amidst my grief. Spending the day with those who sincerely missed Tony reminded me of the positive impact he had on so many lives. After Tony's death, I received an email from my mother-in-law, but its content was so inappropriate that I chose not to respond. She was asking about the amount of life insurance money and continued to email me when I didn't reply, eventually claiming she had a right to receive it. I couldn't handle this on top of everything else, so I ignored her messages. When my mother and I arrived home, we noticed the light was on inside. "That's strange," my mother Karen said, puzzled. "I thought we turned off all the lights." "Maybe I forgot to turn it off because I was too agitated," I replied, trying to reassure her. It's only natural to be upset given the situation. As I unlocked the door, we could hear the sound of a TV coming from inside, which was definitely odd. My mom and I exchanged worried glances and cautiously entered the house. To our shock, we found my sister-in-law and her husband sitting in the living room, surrounded by unfamiliar furniture and boxes. "What are you doing here?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. Without missing a beat, my sister-in-law retorted, "Why did you just barge in here?" "Well, it's your first time, so I'll let you off the hook. We're taking this house. We sold your stuff, so leave." My mother and I were utterly stunned, having no idea what was happening. "Where did our furniture and belongings go?" I asked. She nonchalantly replied, "We had a resale company come today and they took everything. You had some pretty good furniture. We got a good price for it. We bought this new furniture with that money. Who wants furniture that a dead person used? It's bad luck, isn't it? I'm the type to care about such things. Your stuff is packed in these boxes. I don't know if you're minimalist or just poor, but it was a relief that you had so few things." The furniture was carefully chosen by my husband, and I couldn't forgive them for this. My mom was also furious, her face turning beet red, but she was too shocked to respond. I immediately called the resale company. After explaining the situation, they agreed to treat the items as stolen and promised to return them. Honestly, with my husband gone, I want nothing to do with his family, but I do feel a strong desire to stay in the house filled with memories of him. As I grappled with these conflicting emotions, my mother leaned in and whispered to me, "What do you think Tony would say if he were here now?" "Maybe he'd say we should leave." "I'm sure that's true. Tony always used to say, it's worth spending time with people who understand you. But there are also people who just won't get it, no matter how much you explain. It's a waste of time dealing with those low-level aliens." He was, in fact, talking about his mother and sister. I can see it clearly now. If we continue to live here, his family and relatives will keep interfering. So, impulsively, I signed a lease on an accessible apartment. My mother was taken aback by my decisiveness. I asked the resale company to keep the furniture for a few days, and 3 days later, we moved it to the new apartment. In exchange for moving out, I made my mother-in-law and sister-in-law promise to cut ties with us. And so, a new life began with just my mother and me in the apartment. Tony had so many life insurance policies, it was almost obsessive. He often joked, always with a smile, "When I die, you guys will be rich." True to his word, my husband left my mother and me enough money to be comfortable for the rest of our lives. Tony was unable to secure a mortgage when we bought the house, so as an employee at a major corporation, I purchased the house under my name. I ensured that even if something happened to Tony first, I wouldn't be stuck paying a mortgage for a house I wouldn't live in. According to the original contract, The house would be auctioned off if the mortgage wasn't paid for 3 months. In the hustle and bustle of life, 3 months passed in a flash. Then, I received a barrage of calls from my sister-in-law, Jessica, filled with astounding fury. My call history was flooded with calls from Jessica and my mother-in-law, Linda. What the heck? This is seriously scary, I thought. It felt like something out of a horror movie. Since they were being incredibly persistent, I picked up the phone and found out they were furious that the house was being sold. Apparently, when they returned home, they were unable to get in and found a seizure notice. Jessica and her husband had moved out of the apartment they had been living in since Tony passed away, and Jessica had also quit her job. I suggested they move back into their parents' house as they were panicking about suddenly being homeless. To my surprise, Linda had become so involved in gambling that she couldn't keep up and had sold her own house. It seems they have been living together for the past 2 months. From what I hear, they even sold their primary source of income, a parking lot in front of the train station, a long time ago. Now, Linda and Jessica's family are completely homeless. When Linda said, "I'm sorry for everything, let's get along. Can you lend me some money, please?" I replied, "I think it's best if you stay away since I'm a jinx. We're strangers now that we've severed ties." Linda fell silent, mumbling a weak In my mind, I was laughing, thinking, who's the real bad luck charm here? When I said, "I won't lend you a single cent," Jessica, who had been listening to the conversation, shouted, "You devil. Bring us the money right now." "I am a devil and bad luck, so I'm going to hang up now," I replied and ended the call. In truth, I had involved the lawyer for the past 3 months, pushing for the auction of the house. I thought it was an unusual case, but apparently it's not that uncommon. The house was sold without any major trouble, allowing our family a moment of respite. We plan to find a new home with the money Tony left us. Since it's just my mother and me, we don't need a big house. We prioritize security as 2 women living together. So, I chose a condominium with minimal noise disturbance. I remember something my husband always said when we built our home. People can get energy from the sun, so let's create a place where your mother can enjoy her hobby of reading in the garden without feeling self-conscious. With those words, he had made a spacious courtyard for her. So, I looked for a condo with a large balcony where she could enjoy her coffee and read. It's smaller than our previous home, but the room is spacious enough to house the furniture my husband proudly chose. The piece of land that was gifted to us by Tony's grandfather was expansive, and the house sold for more than expected. With that money, I bought a rather luxurious condominium. The security is top-notch, so my worrywart husband would surely rest easy. I heard rumors about my in-laws' family. Our old neighbors were worried about my sister-in-law's family suddenly moving in. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law's family were left homeless. They even tried to borrow money from neighbors. In the end, they couldn't borrow anything and ended up living in public housing after consulting with the community. But they're stubborn people, so it seems the trouble never ends. From what I've heard, they caused a commotion by having a barbecue on their small balcony. Their thoughtless actions must have shocked the locals. Whether due to a lack of money or just frustration, they seem to have loud arguments every night. People say they're causing such a racket that it sounds like things are being thrown around. My sister-in-law's husband left a long time ago, and now it's just her and Linda living together. It's quite the contrast to my peaceful life with my mother. Although we're both 2-member households, it seems that the neighbors are banding together to try to get this nuisance family evicted. No matter where you go, if you're a nuisance, people won't welcome you. What goes around comes around. I just want to live peacefully and quietly, estranged from my embarrassing family. I believe that Tony is surely watching over us. From now on, I plan to live my life without causing trouble to others and do my best to live not just for myself, but for Tony as well.
You're slacking off on the cleaning lately, huh? I can see dust gathering in the corners. Remember, you're at home all day, so do it properly. If I spot dust again, I'm selling your laptop. My husband John's been distant since I got busier with my cartoonist work. When I'm swamped with deadlines, he nags about house chores and even makes me redo them. He expects perfect cleaning since I'm home, but cartooning is my passion. I won't give up. Plus, John's hiding something, and I'm done forgetting him. I'm Ann, 31, and I freelance as a cartoonist. I draw essay-style cartoons and squeeze in work between household chores. When John and I, who's 35, Got married 6 years ago. We agreed I'd be a full-time homemaker. 2 years into marriage, I lost both my parents and we moved into my inherited house, as I'm their only child. I didn't want to give up my passion for drawing cartoons, something I've been doing since my student days. I begged John, explaining that while I'm okay with being a housewife, my true dream is to earn a living through my cartoons. Right now, I'm only publishing independent comics, but could I please work from home? He seemed to think it was just a hobby, but reluctantly agreed, so I kept drawing after we got married. About 6 months ago, a magazine editor spotted one of my cartoons on my website, and I landed a 2-page, 4-panel cartoon gig in their monthly magazine. Since then, more offers for cartooning and illustrating have come my way, keeping me busy. But when I excitedly shared this with John, his reaction was openly disgusted. "You're getting too caught up in this, aren't you? Your main role is supposed to be as a housewife, and your cartoons are just a side thing, right? I bet you're not making much, like pocket money." Why would you say that? I know you're not into cartoons, John, but being a cartoonist has always been my dream. It might be a small gig, but I'm getting paid, so I consider myself a professional. Please don't belittle it. But when I stood up for myself, John got even more upset. "You're dependent on me, and you dare to talk back. If you're unhappy, start earning more than me." I was stunned. I typically bring in about $600 a month, but I limit my workload because of him. And then there's John, always nitpicking about the housework, like, "You've been slacking on cleaning, huh? I see dust gathering. You're at home all day, so get it together. If I see dust again, I'm selling your laptop." It's like a threat, even though I know he's not serious. But it still scares me, and I end up spending time cleaning instead of meeting deadlines. When I'm busy, he gets even more annoying, pointing out every little thing that needs to be done around the house. Then came the breaking point. John always has dinner right when he gets home from work. That day was no different. He sat down, took a bite of the stew, and exploded. "What's this? The carrot isn't cooked properly. Are you trying to mess with me? I come home exhausted, and this is what you serve your husband." I had been lost in my thoughts after meeting a deadline when John's sudden outburst snapped me back to reality. I turned to him just as he grabbed the glass of beer in front of him and splashed it over me. I was shocked. I never imagined I'd have beer thrown at me. The surprise hit me hard because I never saw it coming. I'm sorry. I must have been distracted while cooking. The rest of the meal should be fine, so you can just ignore the carrot. Midway through cooking, I realized I forgot to add the carrots. In my rush, I tossed them into the stew without parboiling them. Even though I had made sure the potatoes were cooked, I completely overlooked the carrots. It was unlike me to make such mistakes, and I felt awful. It seemed John couldn't forgive this slip-up as easily as I had hoped. It's frustrating to have a wife who can't even handle basic household tasks. "Maybe I shouldn't have married you," John muttered as he stood up and walked out of the dining room. I hurried after him as he headed towards the bedroom. "Where are you going?" "I need some space until you realize what you've done." "What?" I stood there stunned as John packed his things into a travel bag and walked out. I tried to follow him, but he hailed a taxi at the nearest station and disappeared. Despite my repeated calls and texts, he didn't respond or read my apologies. Overwhelmed, I collapsed and broke into tears. It was then that I felt a tap on my shoulder. Turning around, I saw Mr. Tom, John's boss. We used to work together before John and I got married, with Mr. Tom being my boss who had mentored me when I first joined the company. "Mr. Tom, you smell like alcohol. Were you drinking while cooking?" I joked, trying to lighten the mood. "Hello. I hate to admit it, but I had a disagreement with John," he replied somberly. "That guy can be a bit arrogant sometimes. It's manageable when it's just work-related, but I can only imagine how frustrating it must be living with him." I vented, feeling relieved to share my feelings. Mr. Tom nodded in understanding, flashing his trademark bright smile. That smile had always been a source of comfort to me during tough times at work. We decided to grab a bite at a nearby diner and catch up. "So what's got you so upset? He asked kindly. Well, it's my fault. I messed up the cooking today. Tried making a stew, but the carrots weren't cooked well, and it upset John. Ah, happens to the best of us. My wife does the same sometimes. When it does, we just roll with it. Getting worked up doesn't help, you know. I appreciated that perspective. A smile crept onto my face as we chatted. So, no argument over drinks then? No, the beer smell? That's from John splashing it on me because of the cooking mishap. I thought I'd dried off at the station, but clearly not, I chuckled. I've had that happen. Even if someone says you smell of alcohol, it's hard to be sure, Mr. Tom chuckled back. What? He splashed beer on you over a small cooking mistake. That doesn't sound like John at all. I never liked the guy, but I never thought he'd do that to his wife. Mr. Tom's voice dripped with genuine indignation, oddly lifting my spirits. Why did you come to the station? You look like you ran here in your apron. Another issue with John? I asked. Yeah, John got strange, called me lazy, and stormed out, saying he wouldn't return until I reflected on my actions. I followed him here, but he took a cab and left. I'm lost, I explained. Mr. Tom's angry expression softened. I can't say for sure now, but I have a bad feeling. I'll look into John. You might want to check the house for anything he left behind, he advised before we parted ways for the day. Following his suggestion, I searched John's usual spots and found a hotel points card in his pants pocket. It had been recently used on a Saturday, a day he claimed to be working. Suspicion grew as I recalled something forgotten. The GPS locator app we installed before marriage. I checked it and found John in an unexpected place, a popular tourist spot known for romantic dates. Convinced he was with someone else, I called Mr. Tom the next day. Mr. Tom, thank you for yesterday. No problem. Is everything all right? Did John not show up for work today? Mr. Tom remained silent for a moment before exhaling heavily. Yes, he's on paid leave for the next 4 days. I suspected as much. I hate to say it, but he's probably... I understand. This helps clear things up. Thank you, I replied. After ending the call, I made a decision and left the house. I had been contemplating my next move. If John ever betrayed me, this is what I would do. Once my task was complete, I dialed another number. Hey, it's been a while, I greeted. The person on the other end responded cheerfully, but as soon as I brought up John, they sided with me. I hung up feeling reassured, believing things would soon take a positive turn. The following day, accompanied by a few individuals, I headed to the location pinpointed by John's smartphone GPS. It led us to a resort hotel near a renowned tourist spot. Currently, he appeared to be outside the hotel, with the GPS indicating he was near the beach. John's face drained of color the moment he laid eyes on me. Seizing the opportunity, I quickly aimed my phone at him and snapped multiple pictures, capturing him alongside a young woman in her early 20s. I had been discreetly photographing them for the past half hour, while John applied suntan oil to the woman, who was clad in a bikini. I allowed them to swim, patiently waiting to gather irrefutable evidence of John's infidelity. Their carefree demeanor or their blatant display of affection didn't shock me. Rather, I felt a sense of relief that they were providing solid proof. What truly rattled John, besides seeing me, was the presence of my in-laws behind me, both regarding him with stern expressions. What's happening here, John? I approached with a forced smile, causing John to stumble backward in the sand and land on his rear. My mother-in-law let out a disappointed sigh. How disgraceful, even for my own son. And who is this woman you've abandoned your wife for? She's useless at home, John blurted out, hastily pointing at me and shifting blame. Is it fair to say she does absolutely nothing? Even if she occasionally skips cleaning, she handles laundry, cooking, and dishes every day, doesn't she? Even I sometimes skip cleaning, and I detest laundry so much I leave it to your father at times. That's because you had a part-time job, right? But it's different with Anne. She's a stay-at-home wife who spends her time drawing and playing. My mother-in-law interjected, her tone firm. John's words fueled my father-in-law's anger. You're completely clueless," he exclaimed, drawing the attention of those around us. Some even seemed ready to capture the scene with their smartphone cameras. "Why don't we continue this discussion in a more appropriate setting?" I suggested, and everyone agreed. My in-laws and I headed to a nearby restaurant where John and the woman he was cheating with changed from their swimsuits into casual clothes and joined us. Once seated, we listened to John's explanation. "I wanted Anne to be a stay-at-home wife, but she picked up this useless hobby of drawing cartoons and neglected her housework. When she refuses to obey me, it's only natural for me to seek a replacement wife," John declared. Mary was quick to respond. "Wait, that's different from what you told me. You said you were troubled because of a stalker at your house, and you wanted to escape that reality for a while. I suggested going to the police, but you assured me the stalker would be caught soon. I wouldn't have gone out with you if I knew you had a wife," Mary sobbed, her distress evident. It turned out she was a college student who had met John on a dating app. Attracted to an older man, she agreed to date him, only to realize she had been deceived. "I'm really sorry. I won't contact John again. Consider this a lesson learned, and I'll be more careful next time," Mary apologized, bowing deeply to me and my in-laws before showing us the screen where she deleted John's number. Leaving some money for her coffee on the table, she hurriedly left. I shot a glare at John, who looked stunned by Mary's departure. It's only natural that I have my own feelings and circumstances. I'm not some robot you can manipulate. Cheating just because things aren't going well is despicable, I admonished. Before John could respond, my father-in-law interjected, his tone firm. "You still seem too content, John. But who's the one working and providing for Anne? You should respect me as the breadwinner." John trembled with anger, but my father-in-law addressed him calmly. "You're acting like a child. Just because things aren't going your way, you're throwing tantrums like a toddler. Learn to accept reality. There's nothing more to say." With that, my in-laws stood up, settled the bill, and made their way to the register. Left alone with John, I found myself at a loss for words. "John, I've been offered a serial comic strip in a magazine," I announced. John's demeanor shifted completely, and he looked at me with surprise. "Oh, congratulations. Because of this opportunity, I can no longer be the stay-at-home wife you want. I'm sorry, but I'm tired of being with you, John. I want a divorce." "I'm sorry. It's all my fault. You can pursue your comics, and I'll help with the housework." "I won't be arrogant anymore," John pleaded, tears welling in his eyes. But I couldn't bear to look at him any longer. "I'm sorry, but that's not the issue anymore. You looked down on me, didn't you? I believed marriage was about equality, but you saw yourself as superior because you were the provider, didn't you?" "Maybe I did, but I changed. I promise I won't make you suffer anymore." "Please don't talk about breaking up," John begged. "I've made the decision to sell the house we lived in. I have a relative who works in real estate, and they've agreed to buy it from me. There's still some paperwork and arrangements to finalize, so it won't happen immediately, but it'll be at a lower price than if we went through a broker. It's my house, and I have the right to do as I please with it, don't I? I want to end our relationship as soon as possible. I'm planning to leave tomorrow, and you should find somewhere else to stay as well." With that, I rose from my seat and headed for the exit. Unlike the day John left, he was now desperately chasing after me. However, when I got into the car, my father-in-law, who was behind the wheel, swiftly drove off. As I slammed the door shut, I saw John running after us, tears streaming down his face, but soon he disappeared from view. Afterward, it seemed John didn't believe what I had done. Upon his return from his trip and discovering the house empty of my belongings, he called me, his voice filled with anguish. I reluctantly answered the phone. "Why did you sell the house? It was our home, wasn't it?" "Why are you saying such things? It's the house I inherited from my parents, remember. But I should have some rights to it too, shouldn't I? In fact, there are no automatic inheritance rights for spouses when it comes to property. If you understand, please leave the house as soon as possible. Expect a call from the lawyer regarding alimony and divorce. Don't try to avoid it, okay?" I stated firmly before ending the call. Later, it seemed that John faced criticism from Mr. Tom for taking paid leave to go on a trip with his mistress. While there was no requirement to disclose the reason for taking time off, he was interrogated for betraying his wife. John faced difficulties at work, feeling ostracized by his colleagues and uncomfortable every day. Additionally, his in-laws had cut ties with him. John attempted to return to his in-laws' house, but they turned him away. After paying alimony, John depleted his savings and began accumulating debt. He now resides alone in a modest apartment, struggling to manage household tasks and leading a chaotic life. I later learned these details from Mr. Tom, but I felt no sympathy. Meanwhile, I settled into a tidy studio apartment and focused on creating drafts for my serialized comic strip. It's an anthology-style comic, drawing inspiration from various people's experiences. The next story I plan to illustrate revolves around marital infidelity, and I'm contemplating using John's situation as material. What's this? Tastes awful. If I eat this, I'll feel sick. Megan chuckled, poking fun at the dish I made. I had tried it earlier and it seemed fine to me. Megan was just being picky. Andy and I had spent 3 days getting ready for this dinner. We were thrilled when we heard that our eldest son and his wife were coming over. Looking back, Andy and I felt silly for getting our hopes up. Megan's rude behavior and Benny just going along with her wore us out. We felt distant from them. Keeping a relationship with Megan felt impossible. Maybe we need to set some clear rules with her before I talk to Megan about it. Andy reached for the dish. I'm Katie, a 70-something homemaker living with Andy. We have a son, Benny. He graduated from a fancy college, got a job in a big company, and moved to Boston. 2 years back, he said he was getting hitched. The girl he introduced as his fiancée seemed nice. Benny said after the wedding, they'd move closer to us and wanted to bond, especially Megan. We were cool with it, but wondered about Megan. Benny assured us she was thrilled and wanted to get close to us. So we were on board with their plan. Around 2 months after tying the knot, Benny and Megan stuck to their word and relocated close to us. We were looking forward to bonding with Benny and getting to know Megan better, but reality hit us hard. Benny switched from his main office to a branch in our town, thinking it'd work out fine, but life wasn't as easy. The issue was Megan's spending habits. Even when Benny was earning well at headquarters, Megan had a habit of overspending. And when Benny's paycheck took a slight hit after the transfer, Megan's spending didn't slow down. It actually got worse. No matter how much Benny brought in, Megan used up most of it, leaving them in a tough spot. Ben was never one to fuss over his looks and lived a simple life. Benny was always hustling to earn more and rarely had time to visit us. Megan wasn't around much either, making their move nearby seem pointless. Even though they were close by, we hardly ever saw them. Benny was always caught up in work, and we were hesitant to directly reach out to Megan. It felt heartbreaking knowing Benny was going through a tough time. Despite his struggles, we tried to help by sending them $1,000 every month. We wished we could give more, but with Andy retired and us living on a pension, it was all we could manage. Every time we sent money, Benny would express his gratitude, but his voice sounded weary, which pained us deeply. We wanted to support him as his parents, so we decided to help in any small way we could. On our days off, we'd spend time with him, take him shopping, and treat him to a meal. When Benny and Megan were away, we cleaned their house for them. We knew these gestures couldn't solve all of Benny's problems, but doing something felt better than doing nothing. 2 years went by, and Benny's situation didn't improve. Seeing him struggle, we felt compelled to do something. We came up with a plan to invite Benny and Megan over for a meal. Knowing Megan might not accept a simple dinner invitation, we decided to go all out and prepare a lavish feast to tempt them. When I suggested this to Andy, he hesitated because he wasn't confident in his cooking skills, but he took the initiative and even went out to buy the ingredients. To our delight, the promise of a feast did the trick, and both Benny and Megan agreed to come over for 3 days and nights. Andy and I busied ourselves with preparing the meal while Benny and Megan showed up at our doorstep in the afternoon. They appeared to unwind, shedding the stresses of their daily lives. Benny seemed particularly worn out, prompting us to offer him our bedroom to rest. As Benny headed off to rest, Megan, seemingly unaware of our cooking efforts, lounged on the sofa, engrossed in the TV. Suddenly, she strolled into the kitchen and bluntly questioned, "Why are you putting in so much effort?" Taken aback by her abrupt inquiry, we were unable to respond before she continued, "Seriously, what's the point? Are you enjoying this? If you have spare time, why not find work and make some money? Retirement must be tough, huh?" Her mocking laughter filled the room. I stepped forward. "Isn't it impolite to speak like that when you're invited for a meal? Where's your respect for your in-laws? A little decency wouldn't hurt." Megan's face flushed red. "Are you trying to pick a fight with me? Do you think your words don't sting?" I had no intention of starting a confrontation. I simply wanted her to exhibit basic manners. However, seeing her twist my words and become defensive left me speechless. Megan, apparently satisfied with her outburst, returned to the living room. Andy looked dismayed, but we had dinner preparations to focus on, so we tried to regroup. Suddenly, from the hallway, we heard Megan's voice escalating. "Why are you always against me? Can't you support me just once? I'm your wife." Alarmed, we hurried out to see what was going on. Megan stood by the bedroom door, and Benny, who should have been resting, was there too. "Why won't you stand by me? Why are you siding with your parents?" Megan shouted, clutching Benny's shirt. Sensing the situation spiraling out of control, we intervened. "Let's calm down. What's happening here?" Andy held Megan back, while I approached Benny to understand what was going on. Weary, Benny recounted what had occurred. He had been trying to get some rest in the bedroom after a long day at work, but was startled awake by a slamming door. Upon investigating, he found Megan in a state of fury. She vented about feeling harassed and labeled me as the problem. Benny was bewildered and overwhelmed. In her heightened emotions, Megan misinterpreted Benny's silence as taking our side, and she began questioning his loyalty as her husband. Benny, still groggy from sleep, struggled to comprehend the situation and felt powerless. Megan's anger only escalated upon seeing Benny's confusion, leaving him caught in the middle and visibly drained. I confronted Megan, saying, "It's not okay to wake up and yell at your exhausted husband. Do you understand how strange you're acting?" Megan, perhaps feeling trapped, mumbled a half-hearted apology, but her eyes showed no remorse. Despite the tension, we gathered around the table for dinner. We had prepared ribeye steaks and fresh seafood from the local market, trying to offer the best. Benny seemed to appreciate it, but Megan, glancing at the spread, made a sarcastic remark, "Just because you serve this doesn't mean I'll overlook the harassment." It was disheartening to hear after all our efforts. Benny tried to lighten the mood with different topics, but Megan shut down each attempt with icy comments. I told her, "You need to change your attitude," but she simply ignored me. The TV was off, so I knew she heard me. Honestly, I felt dejected realizing that she deliberately ignored me. Feeling discouraged, Andy tried to comfort me. We managed to say grace before the meal, but after Megan tasted the dish, she exclaimed, "What's this disgusting mess? I'll get sick from eating this." She laughed mockingly, leaving me speechless at her cruelty. But she didn't stop there. "You're deliberately trying to make me sick with this food, aren't you? Going to such extremes just to torment me. You're truly wicked, mother-in-law." Her words dripped with disdain, causing my hands to tremble with anger. Why must we endure this? How can Megan treat others so cruelly? Seeing Benny so exhausted, why doesn't she feel any inclination to help? Why does she brush off our kindness? I had so much I wanted to express to Megan, but the right words eluded me. However, I couldn't let her behavior continue unchecked. Sensing my frustration, Andy reached for his plate. I've remained silent until now, but I've reached my limit. Andy's usually calm demeanor transformed into something intimidating when he was angry. It had been a long time since I'd seen him so upset. With his anger still simmering, Andy declared, "I'm severing ties with you. Leave immediately." Andy's voice boomed as he confronted Megan. Even Megan appeared startled, her face paling. "What's this, father-in-law? How could you say such things to your daughter-in-law?" Do you find joy in causing trouble? I never imagined you, father-in-law, would stoop so low, she shot back, tears welling in her eyes. But despite Megan's protests, Andy stood firm. I don't care if you call it harassment. I can't consider you family anymore. Leave! Andy's words made Megan realize the severity of the situation. Fine, I'll go. From now on, I want nothing to do with you or mother-in-law. You'll regret this, she declared, packing her belongings and departing. I asked Benny if he wanted to go after her, but he seemed resigned. It doesn't matter, he muttered, focusing on his meal. So we opted to let her go, fearing another confrontation if Benny followed her home. We decided he would stay the night. Benny appeared relieved, preferring not to face Megan at that moment. For the first time in ages, we enjoyed some genuine family time. We swapped stories, aired grievances about Megan, and even camped out in the living room, reminiscing about old times. The cramped couch reminded me how much Benny had grown. However, our peace was short-lived. The next morning, the doorbell rang, jolting us awake. As anticipated, it was Megan. Scanning the room, I confirmed it was indeed Megan at the door. As Benny, Andy, and I debated our next move, the door was pounded loudly. Mother-in-law, I know you're in there. Where's Benny? He's here, isn't he? Let him out. Megan's words filled me with dread. Handing Benny over to her now could only make things worse. So we agreed to let Megan in and have a conversation. As soon as the door opened, Megan barged in, fixing me with a hostile glare. You think you can steal someone's husband? That's outrageous, she yelled, her anger palpable. But her accusations no longer affected me. That's a harsh way to put it. We simply offer him a place to stay because of the way you've been treating him. He made the choice, not me. Blaming me is unfair, don't you think? Megan's face blushed crimson. You're the worst mother-in-law and father-in-law for allowing this behavior. Stay away from us forever. Her words held no sway over us. Andy and I were prepared to sever ties with Megan. Tension hung thick in the air until Benny's words changed everything. I can't do this anymore. Let's get a divorce. Benny's words stunned Megan, her face still flushed with anger. Divorce? Seriously? You're choosing your parents over me? Her tone softened, and she pleaded with Benny, her eyes filled with desperation. But Benny stood firm. A wife who neglects her responsibilities and parties constantly versus my parents, who've always been there for me. The choice is obvious. Megan, still unconvinced, argued, they're just manipulating you. Once they have you, they'll abandon you too. Baseless accusations. We never abandoned Benny, but Megan, eager to portray us as villains, hysterically shouted, You're trying to take Benny away from me. Do you hate me that much? At this point, it was unclear how to calm her down. Then, unexpectedly, Benny slapped Megan across the face. The room fell silent, shocked. Megan struggled to comprehend what had just happened. You've not only been a burden to me, but also to my parents. Aren't you ashamed? I hoped you'd come to your senses, but I was wrong. Please don't say such things. I love you, please reconsider. My decision is final. From now on, we're strangers. Don't ever call yourself my wife again. Megan looked defeated. No one reached out to her. Eventually, she left, realizing there was no point in arguing. In the following days, Benny stayed with us as he initiated the divorce proceedings, which were recently finalized. Megan was hesitant to sign the papers, so they had to involve lawyers. Fortunately, Benny had evidence of Megan's extravagant spending habits, which helped him secure the divorce. He also sought compensation in court. Due to his deteriorating health from stress and overwork, Benny was unfortunately diagnosed with a lifestyle-related illness. Megan's parents eventually paid the settlement, leaving Benny indebted to them. Megan now works tirelessly day and night to repay them. After the divorce, Benny continued to reside with us for some time. We wanted to give him a reprieve, especially considering all he had endured. Today, Benny has regained his footing and is working diligently as ever. While life may present him with more challenges, we will always be there for him as his parents, offering our unwavering support in every possible way.
Why are you entrusting our newborn baby to my sister every day? My husband's call interrupted my day. His usually calm voice was tinged with unexpected anger. Rapidly, I sought to dispel the misunderstanding. Our daughter is at home, sleeping, I assure him. Surprised, his tone shifted. Really? He exclaimed. Confusion enveloped us both as questions arose. I'll speak with my sister-in-law to uncover the truth, I resolved. I reached out to my sister-in-law, Marissa, and uncovered a startling truth. Let me introduce myself. I'm Linda, married to Bob for 3 years, just a year younger than him. Our joy was recently doubled with the arrival of our daughter Hannah. She's the epitome of cuteness, but being a first-time mom has its challenges. With my parents living far away, I didn't have the luxury of heading back home after childbirth. Since leaving the hospital, I've been navigating this new world solo during the day. I must admit, I've been getting by, largely thanks to Bob's unwavering support. Despite his long work hours, he's always there for Hannah and me, never once complaining. His gentle demeanor eases any parenting stresses I encounter. Whether it's struggling to soothe Hannah to sleep or tending to her cries in the dead of night, his presence has been a lifeline, and I'm immensely grateful for it. So you can imagine my shock when he called, his voice laced with unexpected frustration. Linda. Mom just called me. What's going on? He demanded. Confused, I replied, Your mom? What are you talking about? Why would we leave our newborn with Marissa every day? His mention of Marissa caught me off guard. She's Bob's sister, residing just a short walk away with their parents. Marissa, working from home, also takes care of her mother, making her quite flexible with her time. My husband's critique persisted. Leaving a 3-week-old baby, I couldn't fathom doing that. Marissa hasn't cared for a baby before. I get that you're tired post-birth, but you should have talked to me before entrusting her to Marissa, he expressed, his worry palpable. His distress signaled that this was no ordinary misunderstanding. Wait, I'm lost. Marissa caring for a newborn. Why did your mom call you? Why would I need your consultation? What do you mean? Leaving Hannah with Marissa? Have I been doing that? I countered, utterly bewildered. It's been nearly 2 weeks. Marissa didn't complain, not wanting to strain your relationship, but Mom couldn't stay silent, he clarified. Bob's revelation stunned me. It was a narrative I had no recollection of, with my daughter right beside me. With numerous questions swirling, I prioritized clearing the confusion. Swiftly, I assured him, our daughter's at home, asleep. She's right here with me. Bob's astonishment resurfaced. What do you mean? He inquired. I'm just as confused as you are. Honestly, I've been following the advice to keep newborns indoors, so besides medical appointments, I haven't been anywhere. I haven't even visited your family's house, and it's been a while since Marissa came over after Hannah's birth, I clarified. Then whose baby is Marissa caring for? Bob pondered aloud. I wish I knew. Why would Marissa fabricate looking after our baby? Each question seemed to spiral into another, leaving us both puzzled. As the lunch break chimes sounded through the phone, I made a decision. I need to speak with Marissa. I want to understand why she might concoct such a lie. If there's a misunderstanding and she thinks she's caring for Hannah, that's concerning. I'll also call Mom, I announced. Bob paused before expressing his regret. I'm sorry for doubting you. I was just really worried about Hannah. It's all right. You're concerned about Hannah, aren't you? Besides, when I told you she's right here, you didn't doubt me. You trusted me, I comforted him. After our call ended, I wasted no time dialing my sister-in-law's number. Marissa, do you have a moment? There's something I need to discuss, I started. Linda, I need to talk to you too, Marissa replied. Marissa and Bob are close in age, which is why she's the same age as me despite being my sister-in-law. We've always had a good relationship, even going out together when I was dating Bob. So, it puzzled me why she hadn't mentioned anything about this situation. I couldn't fathom why she would fabricate such a story. Well, now's a good time. Bob just filled me in. Marissa, what's this about you looking after Hannah? I haven't left her with anyone, I questioned, bewildered. Marissa's surprised voice followed, accompanied by the sound of a crying baby. It seemed she was indeed tending to an infant. Listening to Marissa's reaction, a realization dawned on me. Marissa wasn't fabricating anything. She genuinely believed she was caring for Hannah. To dispel her misconception, I began to explain the truth. To dispel her misconception, I began to explain the truth. Hannah's right here with me, fast asleep. I'm really baffled by all of this. But how did you end up with a baby, Marissa? And why did you think it was Hannah? I asked, seeking clarity. Marissa replied, shedding light on the situation. Last week, Dad dropped off a baby with me. He said, Linda seems overwhelmed, so you should assist her with the baby. This revelation left me dumbfounded. Then Marissa disclosed another shocking detail. I was terrified because I've never cared for a baby. I hadn't heard from you, Linda. And when I considered calling you, Dad warned, if you contact Linda, she'll just stress out. Show some consideration for your sister-in-law. I have my own responsibilities, even when I'm at home. It appeared that my father-in-law's deceit initiated this chaos, but the identity of the child Marissa was caring for remained unclear. Thinking that confronting my father-in-law directly might resolve the confusion, I inquired if he was home. Unfortunately, he's out at the moment. Lately, he returns home late in the evening, takes the child Marissa's been tending to, claiming he'll return her to Linda, then leaves again. He usually returns in about 20 to 30 minutes, Marissa explained. Frustrated by my father-in-law's manipulation involving my daughter and me, I felt compelled to address the situation head-on. I understand. I'll discuss this with Bob, but we might visit tonight, I decided before ending the call. I promptly emailed my husband, detailing what I learned from his sister. We should ask Dad directly, came the suggestion. So when Bob returned home, we made our way to my in-laws. Along the journey, Bob recounted his conversation with his mother. Mom was also quite upset to discover that the child she thought was her grandchild wasn't. That's a significant shock, isn't it? I didn't envision Hannah's first family gathering unfolding like this. It's quite a complicated situation, he elaborated. Due to her back issues, his mother hadn't met our daughter yet. I had hoped to introduce Hannah to her once she was ready to venture out after a month. But now, I found myself disheartened that our introduction had to occur amidst such turmoil. Upon reaching my in-laws' home, we found my mother-in-law and sister-in-law both appearing bewildered as we entered. Marissa spoke up. Bob, Linda, Dad mentioned he would return the child we've been caring for, but he hasn't returned yet. Understanding the situation, Bob intervened. I see, Mom. Despite the confusion, this is our daughter, Hannah. With that, I brought Hannah closer to my mother-in-law. Upon laying eyes on Hannah, my mother-in-law's expression softened. She's absolutely adorable. She bears a striking resemblance to Bob when he was a baby. I'm thrilled to finally meet her, and Linda, you've done remarkably well. I'm sorry you've been entangled in all of this, she expressed with sincerity. It's all right. I'm just as perplexed as everyone else, I responded. Just as I spoke, Marissa chimed in. I'm baffled too. Who is this child I've been caring for? I don't understand why Dad would lie like this. I've been putting in so much effort, believing it was Hannah. He should consider my feelings too. Marissa's frustration mirrored my own towards our father-in-law. Attempting to lighten the mood, Bob interjected, but Marissa, you've met Hannah before. You should have noticed it's a different baby. Well, don't all babies look alike? I thought something was off. But I assumed babies' appearances change quickly. Marissa hastily defended herself. At that moment, our father-in-law returned. I'm back. Wait, why are Bob and Linda here? Our father-in-law's panic was palpable. This deception stemmed from him. The rest of us shared disapproving glances, each silently accusing him. Struggling under the tension, our father-in-law began to stutter. Oh, Linda, it's been some time. What brings you here? Did you forget something? He attempted to divert attention. Turning to Marissa, he added, Marissa, what's going on? I asked you to check for forgotten items. I seethed with anger at our father-in-law's manipulation, using mine and my daughter's names in his deceit and then shifting the blame onto Marissa. I instinctively held my daughter closer, feeling the tension radiate through the room. Both my husband and sister-in-law shared the same sentiment, their fists clenched in frustration. It was me who broke the silence, the anger evident in my voice. Dad, seriously, are you honestly saying that? This is beyond unacceptable even for you. What do you mean? My father-in-law seemed startled by the intensity of my tone. My husband and sister-in-law echoed my sentiments, demanding answers. Dad, explain yourself. Linda has never left Hannah with anyone. Why would you fabricate such a lie? There must be a reason for someone to care for a stranger's newborn, right? That's correct. You manipulated me into caring for a child. Who is this baby? I'm terrified, even if it's my nephew's, let alone a stranger's. I won't tolerate it anymore, Marissa interjected with rapid-fire conviction. My father-in-law was speechless, while the three of us continued to glare at him, demanding the truth. However, my mother-in-law's reaction was different. She turned pale, murmuring, "No, it can't be. You're not still involved with her?" Her words left my husband, sister-in-law, and me stunned. My father-in-law began to sweat, feigning innocence. What are you talking about?" he stuttered, attempting to deflect. But my typically calm husband had reached his limit. "Dad, enough with the act. You've been playing dumb all along. Do you think you can deceive us? We know you've been lying about everything. Just come clean." "Wait, Bob, please calm down." I attempted to intervene, but my husband persisted. "Dad, you've been manipulating Linda and Hannah to cover up your deceit, and you owe Marissa an apology. Caring for a newborn is a monumental responsibility, even if it's your own child. Consider how overwhelming it must have been for Marissa, who has never experienced parenthood before." Once he started, my husband couldn't halt his tirade. Despite whatever excuses our father-in-law might conjure, my husband remained steadfast. Perhaps realizing he couldn't evade the truth any longer, my father-in-law spoke softly, and then he confessed to the unbelievable truth. "That child is mine." At his admission, my husband's momentum dissipated, his mouth hanging agape in disbelief. Marissa and I were equally stunned into silence. It was my mother-in-law who shattered the quiet. Her voice quivered, tears brimming in her eyes. "I knew it. You're still involved with her. I was foolish to forgive you before." "Involved with her?" my husband queried, puzzled. In response, our father-in-law's complexion paled even further. Ignoring him, my mother-in-law continued, "He had an affair. It happened around the time you two were getting married, about 3 years ago. He promised me he'd never do it again, and I forgave him. But now, that's why I thought Hannah bore a resemblance to Bob. She's his flesh and blood after all. I thought she was my true grandchild." Unable to contain her emotions any longer, my mother-in-law broke into tears. Witnessing her distress only fueled my anger towards my father-in-law. My husband regained his composure, unleashing his wrath upon our father-in-law. "You're despicable, Dad. You not only deceived us but betrayed Mom twice. How could you stoop so low? I can't fathom that someone like you is our father." Bob's outburst was followed by Marissa's incredulous response. "What do you mean by my child? Are you joking? You had a child with your mistress and left it with me? I can't believe this. How could you do something so despicable? I never want to see your face again." Despite the scathing remarks from his own children, our father-in-law merely chuckled and remarked, "Calm down. There's nothing we can do about what's already happened. The mistress didn't want to marry me or anything like that. She just didn't have any money, so she had to work. In the meantime, I had to take care of the child." I couldn't bear witnessing my father-in-law's callousness. "Enough," I interjected, my voice trembling with anger. "This isn't a laughing matter. A life has been brought into this world. Do you grasp the gravity of that at your age?" My father-in-law seemed taken aback, losing his balance and falling onto the ground. However, instead of offering assistance, Bob and Marissa hurled insults. "You worthless old man, you're no longer our father. I can't even stand to look at you." "Get out of our sight," they exclaimed. Even faced with their fury, my father-in-law attempted to downplay the situation, saying, "Don't say such things." My lips tensed as I stared daggers at my father-in-law. "I no longer have the patience to tolerate someone like you. Let's get divorced," I declared firmly. My father-in-law's smile vanished, his face contorting with wrinkles as he became serious. "But didn't you forgive me last time?" he pleaded. However, his attempt at manipulation was futile. "Yes, I forgave you for your infidelity, but I won't tolerate your disrespect any longer," I retorted. "If having you out of our lives brings peace to our home, then so be it. And as for my survival, I'll manage just fine without you," I added. As my father-in-law clung to my mother-in-law's feet, I watched him with disdain. Bob and Marissa mirrored my sentiments, their gazes cold and unwavering. It was evident that everyone in the room had reached their limit with my father-in-law. Marissa erupted in anger. I'll take care of Mom, so we'll be fine without you. But how do you plan to live? You've always relied on Mom for everything from cooking to laundry. Marissa's words visibly rattled my father-in-law. He turned to my mother-in-law with pleading eyes. You wouldn't leave me, would you? We spent decades together. You can't imagine life without me, can you? However, his hopes were swiftly dashed as my mother-in-law shook off his clinging arm. Stop kidding yourself. How much do you need to degrade people to feel satisfied? Who would want to stay with a cheater like you? I'm filing for divorce right now. If you're so fond of her, why don't you go be with your mistress? My mother-in-law snapped, her voice firm and resolute. What? Wait, let's talk. We can fix this. That woman meant nothing to me. You're the only one I love. My father-in-law pleaded, clutching onto my mother-in-law once more, but he was met with another wave of Marissa's fury. Talking to someone who refuses to acknowledge their mistakes is pointless. We're leaving this place soon, and Mom is coming with us. Until we're gone, stay away from home, Dad. I never want to see you again. Now get out. Marissa demanded, attempting to forcefully escort my father-in-law out. When he refused to budge, Bob had to physically drag him away. Please wait. Give me another chance, just one more. My father-in-law pleaded until the very end, but his pleas fell on deaf ears as nobody paid him any attention. As Marissa had foreseen, my father-in-law's life spiraled into chaos. Struggling to manage even the simplest tasks, he found himself unable to tolerate the growing clutter and filth in his home. Desperate for assistance, he turned to his mistress, only to be met with rejection at her doorstep. It appeared she had no intention of marrying him either. With no one left to care for the children, his mistress was unable to work, leading to financial strain. She began pressing my father-in-law for alimony, even resorting to legal action to secure child support. Meanwhile, my sister-in-law and mother-in-law relocated to an apartment not far from ours. As over a month had passed since Hannah's birth, I started visiting them more frequently, accompanied by Hannah. I maintained my amicable relationship with Marissa, acting as if nothing had changed, and my bond with my mother-in-law remained strong. Moving forward, I'm determined to raise my daughter to the best of my abilities, with the support of my husband, sister-in-law,